All right. Well, welcome to another episode of our Create the Ripple podcast. Here we trust the niggle and we tell the truth. I am stoked for my guest today. His name is Randy King. And as you can see, he is a fellow podcaster. So it's super fun when I get to hang out with someone who does what I get to do. And so we share that immediate love. Now, he is up to a lot of really cool things. And when we and I had a chance to talk previously, I was fascinated by the conversations that we got to engage in. So, Randy, before we get too far into our chit chat today, I'd love it if you could just let my listeners know who you are, what you're up to, that sort of thing, and then we'll dive into a couple of questions here and chat for the rest of the day.
Sounds good. As always, Candice, thanks for having me again, even though the listeners won't hear the first, but thanks for having me
No.
again. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I am an education-based self-defense instructor here in Edmonton, Alberta, and I focus primarily on conflict management and violence prevention solutions. So what I do is I teach educational and physical aspects of self-defense across the board to a very wide demographic of people, from people who live with the First Nations, to youth at risk, to sex workers, to white collar CEOs, to martial athletes. I have a very diverse group of people because self-defense is pretty much, it's something that goes through everybody's life. It doesn't matter who you are. Protecting yourself from potential danger is something that everybody's worried about, no matter where you live or what economic place you sit in.
I can remember in our first conversation, one of the things you had said was, if I came in like most people, right, assuming that, you were going to teach me what I needed to know if I got into a fight or if I needed to protect myself. And your attitude was, well, if you've already gotten there, then I haven't done my job. And I was just like, that was like, of course, right? And that was such a neat perspective for me, because I've been around martial arts in a small form throughout my life, but that was sort of always the attitude I had, was be prepared for when it happens. And your attitude was, well, we can do that. And here's what I'd love to talk to you about. So can we dive right into that? Because I mean, certainly as a woman, that's something I'm thinking about. I'm also a mom of a daughter. And so this is something that's also, is like, this suddenly matters on a whole other level.
I hear you. So I have a daughter as well. And I remember the day I saw her tiny little crying body in the hospital, it was like a deck of cards in my head reshuffled. So like everything's different now, my priorities and how I got to think and all this stuff. And though, so that wasn't, I don't want to say that was the precipice of what changed what I did, but I, like you and almost everybody else who does martial arts, started in martial arts with the concept of, when a fight happens, not if, even when a fight happens, that these are the things that I should do. And while that's not wrong in a martial arts context where we have rules and regulations and drug testing and weight classes and all that kind of stuff that makes competition pure and awesome, and I'm not saying that's bad, I'm just saying that's what the aspect that I started with. And then look at self-defense in an organic place, not in a place where consent was given, right? So I didn't choose to get into this fight. I didn't, prepare for 12 weeks. It's just something that's happened to me without my consent. That is so very asymmetrical. It's not even by any stretch of the imagination, right? They could have drugs in their system. There could be more of them. They could have weapons, etc. They're usually bigger and stronger, or they have some kind of trick, right? So that's where the education mindset kicked in. And like a lot of the time, as you were saying, when you're already in the fight, it's already a bad spot to be in. And I'm not saying that if you follow our strategies, you'll never get into a fight, because that's impossible. You can make no mistakes and still lose and still get into a bad situation. But we can definitely increase the odds or the percentages of your safety by just giving you some education on what violence looks like, what the goals of violence are, what an escalation cue looks like. So how to know when somebody's getting mad. And this goes from the boardroom to the back alley, right? You can talk about this stuff with your friends if you're in human resources or management, and you learn how to mitigate conflict there. Or if you are somewhere traveling, maybe you're in the wrong part of town, you took a wrong turn, you can use these skills there as well. So education by far is the most important thing when it comes to self-defense, in my opinion, because education is accessible now. Training takes time. So if I say, look for this, this, and this, if you can remember that, you can access that information now and be like, okay, so Randy said this, 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 this is happening, I can prepare. But if all we do is teach you how to respond when an assault is already happening, we've missed a huge piece of the puzzle. And that's my life's mission, is to give people that huge pre-contact or pre-conflict cues. That's where most of my education focuses on, and also focus on the aftermath. So while I do teach physical skills, it's only about 20% of the education I give. The other 80% is before it happens, and then what to do after it happens. Because, you know, your martial arts MMA club, and again, I'm not saying anything bad about them, but they're not going to tell you like, so after you're sexually assaulted, this is who you should call, and this is like what you do, and maybe your parents won't believe you. Like, that's just not part of the curriculum, and it shouldn't be, but that's why companies like mine exist.
That's really powerful, I think, because having been a victim of a sexual assault, it would have been nice to have known some of those things, right?
Right.
And, you know, I'm on a bit of a mission these days, especially with the podcast, to talk about things that are a little bit uncomfortable for people. And, you know, I was talking with a gal the other day, and I said, I'm not really wanting to, you know, die on any of these hills when I'm talking about an idea or a concept or something that we can do. It's more like, I know that our experiences are so vast, and that whenever we give people education or knowledge or, you know, skill, we empower them, right, to cope,
Right.
and then to know what to do moving forward. Because I know that for a lot of us, when something, you know, bad happens and we're attacked, or mentally, physically, emotionally, however that might be, it affects the self-esteem, which then once we're there, we're like, it's like a target on your head.
Yeah.
Right, that these other people can pick up on. And how powerful is it? At least it was for me, when I was like, I know who I am, I know what I'm about, and just those things, that this feels like a next level of empowerment, which I think is so incredibly powerful, that you have the opportunity to share with people.
I love it. It's such a rewarding career. So I was in the corporate world for a little bit, and I did not enjoy it because what I was doing, it didn't feel like I was making a difference. Whereas 2 weeks ago, I got to do a free seminar for the Salvation Army's Cornerstone group, which helps women transition from bad situations to a more normal life. And that was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I've got to travel and train and do a bunch of really cool stuff, but those conversations, those are the important ones, because I provide, at least this is their feedback, I provided a guilt-free, judgment-free self-defense course explaining why things happen. But again, like I said before, even if it did happen, doesn't mean you messed up. We're just trying to give you as much information as possible, right? I can tell my daughter all day to be careful, but one day she might bump into a coffee table, and all of the information I gave her, while applicable, still didn't stop that from happening. So especially when we're talking about this stuff, because I work with I really only have 2 types of clients that I work with. I have preventative clients, people that don't want something bad to happen to them. And then I have what I call curative clients. Something already happened. There is some kind of trauma that is living in their brain. And the really cool thing about like this kind of training and then adding that physical thing is we can help give people back their power through education, scenario-based training, through trauma awareness, through being sensitive to the needs of the client. We can actually help them progress a little bit forward, which is awesome.
That's huge. And I can certainly relate to that. I mean, I even look at the things I'm doing, doing now, the reward is not always, the financial, but the need to have that give back and to share sort of what is what's so important. I know that was certainly a huge, push for me to do the podcast, to start talking about some of these things that make people go, "Whoo, that wasn't an easy subject." And I think, no, but we got to be talking about it. One, because we got to remove shame around so much of this stuff. I mean, having come from the victim space, shame ruled my life, and it affected every single area of my life. And was used continually by well-meaning people. A lot of very well-meaning people, said, "Well, this happened to you." And I remember thinking, yeah, but it did happen. You're right. It happened. Like, it's not happening now. It did happen. It's not happening anymore. And I'm trying to move on. And so that was a really interesting piece, which I love that you're moving people like, okay, and here's how we move forward.
Right. Well, that's the thing too. Like, there's we talk about aftermath of violence. There's a cultural aftermath as well. And what I mean by cultural is who you hang out with is they're going to see it through the mirror of their own experiences. Right. So a really great example is a lot of people like to blame victims because of the way they decided to dress. Now, Statistically, that has not shown in any way that the way you dress affects being assaulted. And there's a really, really cool. So I just got TikTok because I guess I'm supposed to have that, and I'm trying to learn it. So I'm scrolling.
I'm not sure about it either, but I'm there.
So I'll follow you. So I'm scrolling through it, and they have this really, it's actually a really good place for people to give very honest messages. And they have I don't know if it's a movement, I don't know what to call it, but there's a trend, probably a trend where there are women showing like, this is what I was wearing, and they'll show a picture or they'll be wearing it when this happened. It's really neat. So neat might be the wrong word. It's interesting.
No, it's powerful though, because I agree with you. That's very powerful. Ladies, I know they're all going to their phones right now to be like, where is this TikTok?
Yeah, jump on it. I don't know how they categorize on TikTok yet. So I don't know if it's a hashtag or whatever, but I'm seeing a lot of it, and it's good because shame sometimes comes from people that mean well, right? They're not trying to shame you, but like, for an example, right? Because most people make things personal. So let's say somebody got assaulted, so you're raped. We're just use a real word. They got raped, not touched on their boob by accident, like they were raped, and it was awful. Then the first hurdle they have to jump is telling people it happened, because they're healing, but also people are going to ask questions, not because they think the person is wrong or evil, but a lot of people ask the questions, what were you wearing? Where were you? Not to victim blame, but to be like, to make sure they don't mimic those same behaviors themselves so they can become prey, right? So it'd be like if your friend got bit by a rattlesnake, you wouldn't be like, you'd be like, okay, where were you? Where are rattlesnakes? What, like, weren't you wearing pants? Like, you'd ask these questions so you don't get attacked by a rattlesnake.
I've never thought about it that way, but you're totally right.
Right.
Okay, cool. Keep talking.
So, okay, cool. But so again, never with humans, it's never always. Some people are just bad people. But we have to remember, like, it's the way we like to talk about it is the victim gets to dictate their trauma to a certain extent, being that they get to tell us if it's traumatic. We don't get to put our thought process of what's traumatic on them, right? Because obviously we all have different lenses that we look through when we talk about trauma, especially after. But what people mostly bump into, the two biggest ones, one that I'm super cognizant of, and then another one that's kind of happening, is the people either being like, yeah, that happens because it's already happened to them. So there's transferring their trauma and then like commiserating. Number two, they're trying to find ways it won't happen to them. What were you wearing? What were you doing? Number three is the person gets more scared to talk to somebody close to them about it than they are to talk to a stranger. So this has been something I've really tried to pay attention to in my parenting style, because I have a young daughter and I'm not going to be there all the time. And sometimes you can make no mistakes and still lose the fight, right? So statistically, odds aren't great that she won't have some kind of awful encounter in her life, right? So I wanted to make sure that I became the dad/support structure, that she knew I wouldn't lose my mind. I don't want her first thought if something happens, I would hate her first thought to be, oh my God, my dad could never know. That should not be her first thought.
Agree.
Right? Her first thought should be, I need medical attention. I need to call somebody I trust. Hey, my dad deals with this. That's the place I want to go to, right? But there's a lot of old school masculinity that is saying your daughter's never going to have sex, which is you're being ridiculous if you think that. And then, right, like it's true. Like I held a tiny baby girl and I was like, one day we're going to have puberty and it's going to be awkward, right? That's just what happens as people.
Yeah.
But those dads that are like, if anything ever happens, I'll kill everybody. You don't want your child thinking, okay, don't tell my dad because I don't want my dad to go to jail for something that happened to me. So these have been two things, but I think empathy isn't in as big of a supply as people think it is. And a lot of people, when they hear your experience, they'll put, so like I said, is empathy. They'll put themselves in that spot, but they'll forget that you're the victim because they don't want to be a victim so badly. So bad choices are made. And again, sometimes it's for evil, but sometimes it's for lack of knowing, right? So we need to re-educate people on shame and what people wear. And there's this argument, right? It's like, don't teach women how to not get raped, teach boys not to rape. It's actually both. You should do both of those things. You should educate young men and you should educate young women, because guess what? Unfortunately, it's going to happen and it's going to keep happening. And that's why we say education is 80%, because 80% of the time it's going to work, but 20% of the time it's just not. And then you have to go physical.
Yep. Wow. I'm once again inspired by our conversation. I think there's something powerful about knowing that there's something you can do about it, right? Because it can feel very overwhelming. And I know that was what happened for me after it happened, is when I did finally find the courage. And it was like 2 years later that I found the courage to start talking about it, because it was somebody I knew, right? And so for me, it was one of those things that, the first response was, well, didn't you know? And I was like, you think if I'd have known, like, that was like the first thing I said, no, I'm not an idiot.
I absolutely knew, of course. That's why I kept hanging out with him. Duh.
I put myself into that situation, and yes, of course there were warning signs. I was ignoring most of them. And it was really interesting because I'm in a phenomenal relationship now. And I was discussing some of these things that have had an impact on how I've approached relationships, masculine and feminine. And the impact it's had. And, I've shifted a lot of that. And his comment was, oh, you needed really good boundaries. You really needed, somebody needed to tell you what was appropriate and not appropriate. You knew what wasn't feeling good, but you didn't necessarily have the words at that point to express it. And I was thinking, wow, you're right. And because this conversation didn't happen for me, right? Well-meaning people just assumed that they would protect me for a very long time. But then there was a moment when I wasn't protected. Should have been, wasn't, and didn't have the language with which to transition out of a dangerous situation. So I love what you're saying. So I love what you're saying here, because I think it's really, really powerful. So do you find yourself working mostly with like kids, youth? What's your, what are you mostly working with now?
So I want to kind of spin off a little bit on the boundary conversation we just had first, and then we can go to that. That's okay. Yeah. Cool. So, yeah, I 100% think that the boundary conversation is important and needs to be had. It's actually so important that we developed a boundary setting course, because
that is so cool. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have a link somewhere for that.
Okay, yeah. So here, people, it's not online yet, but it will be. You can hire me in person for whatever.
Done. So excited.
But I think that boundaries. So You mentioned a thing. You mentioned two things that I wanted to point out. Number one, you said the person that attacked you was somebody you knew. Statistically, that is what happens. So 70% of violent crimes that happen to other people, especially in the sexual realm, is from somebody that's known. There's some kind of relationship. So whether it's a date and the relationship is 20 minutes or it's a long term, that is super common. We have this stranger danger myth that, like, you know, all these rapists are hiding in alleys. And while that does exist 20 to 30% of the time, the most danger you're going to have is somebody who's trying to get into your good graces, to get you to a secondary location, to try to do stuff that they want to do. And they know what they're doing because they've practiced doing it. So when people are like, oh, like, did you not know? You're like, no, I didn't know, because this is my first time being assaulted. And this is Buddy's 800th time doing this. He's kind of got the reps on me, right?
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. And that was actually language that was used. I've done this before. It's no big deal. You're feeling this way. Someone else felt the same way. And I remember thinking afterwards, like, what? Like, anyway, yeah.
He groomed you and he gaslit you at the same time.
Yes,
right?
He did.
Yeah. So this is so hyper common. It makes me sick to my stomach, because you'll hear, like, again, we'll talk about hashtags and social media movements and stuff, but you hear about, like, the hashtag #NotAllMen. Yeah, you're right. It's not all men. And guess what? Good men out there, they're listening to shows like this. Yeah, it's mind blowing. This stuff is happening. And I understand that you can't understand that people could do that, but they do. And they do it all the fucking time. So if you see a, you know, stand against men thing, don't be offended if you're a good person, because we know it's not you. We know it's not you. It's not me, but they fucking exist, right? And I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, sorry. They beeping exist. I think that's really important, right? Like, a lot of people are getting defensive. You're right. Not every dude is a rapist. You're not. Nobody's saying that. But the analogy I like is, if I put 100 M&Ms in a bowl and 2 of them would make you sick, would you be wary of all the rest of the M&Ms? You fucking absolutely would, right? Like, so guys out there
appreciate this. Yes.
Yeah. Guys out there, if you're listening to the show, I understand how frustrating. I don't like being attacked either. I spend my whole life trying to help, but unfortunately, in a lot of cases, our gender is the villain in the story. And it's not you, but it might be that creepy friend you explain away as being socially awkward, right? So
Thank you.
Pay attention to who you're with, do that kind of stuff. The other thing I wanted to point out was, you said it took you 2 years. 2 years is actually small. It takes people 10 to 20 years. So, like, nobody gets to dictate how you feel unless you paid them professionally to do that. So unless they have training and they're saying you're doing it correctly, don't listen. So let's go with a less extreme example, but let's say you were dating somebody for 2 weeks. If it takes you 5 months to get over that breakup, then it took you 5 months. That's how your emotions work. There is no timetable on trauma or pain or whatever. So if it takes you 2 years, it took 2 years. If it takes you 10 years, it took 10 years, right? You can collapse that time by seeking out help, trying to empower yourself, get those things. But please don't put a timetable and make it sound long or small on your trauma, because it's going to process how it processes.
Well, in those 2 years, I continued to date this human being.
And that's
right. And I look back now and I think, oh, honey, right. And it just took that long before I just finally, I can't. And
you made the best choices.
Pretty. Like, the breakup was bad. I remember thinking, at least I'm free.
Right.
And then it's crazy. So it brings a lot. I love that you brought up this not all men thing, because I'm with an incredible man. I've had incredible relationships. I had great examples. But you're right. It's because I'm like, yeah, and there was a couple M&Ms in that thing. A little weary now.
And why wouldn't you be, right? So I think it's really important that people hear this kind of stuff, because the narrative is so different, right? The narrative is like, if you know a good man, then, stop doing it. It's pay attention to the problem that people are discussing. Try not to take it personal, right? It's like going to a liver cancer fundraiser and screaming about lung cancer. Yes, we know lung cancer exists, but that's not what we're talking about right now, right? We're talking about liver cancer. So I think, because a lot of people have experienced horrific trauma. The other thing you need to understand is who you are now isn't who you were then, right? So you made the best choices you could with the information you had at the time. A lot of people put themselves into a guilt spiral because they learn new information and then feel bad they didn't know it before. You could not have possibly controlled that. You don't have time travel. So like everybody has things they regret, right? Whether they're extreme or unextreme, but you made the best choice you thought you could with the information that you had, right? Then you learned and you grew and you got out. And that's the hugest part of this battle. It wasn't time to choke him out and dominate him. It wasn't time to, right? It was just time to get the fuck out of there and do what you got to do. So congrats on you.
That's like a win.
Yeah, it is a huge win.
Yeah. No, it's, you know, and I almost enjoy talking about it now, usually because people are surprised, and then, or they get that face of, oh my God, me too. And I think, yes, good. Now we're talking about it, because I think shame lives in the dark. It really does. It thrives off that. And, you know, I've had some people say, you really shouldn't talk about that if you're going to do this. And I'm going, thanks for more shame. And I'm going to continue to talk about it. But I get it, right? You have no idea what their trauma is either. But it's like, no, here's my stand.
Hey, it's Candice. I hope you're really enjoying the show. I know I certainly am. I want to give a big shout out to one of the products that I absolutely love using. So this is 36-year-old skin, and I am in love with it. Yes, I am wearing a teeny tiny bit of foundation. I'm wearing a little bit of eyeshadow, but in general, I want to go like really, really close. This is my skin. Phenomenal, right? So I recently started using a product called Biocell. Biocell is liquid collagen. Now, there's a lot of buzz about collagen right now, but you want to find one that mirrors closest the human kind of collagen. I was super impressed with this particular collagen. This is made with only the sternums of chickens. So that's the, the sternum bone of chickens, in a place that has already ethically and humanely taken care of these chickens. And so we're basically using a part of the chicken that would normally just disappear and be used for other things. I have not got into the collagen world before now, mostly because I know that a lot of the collagens out there, especially the powdered collagen, they have things like cow hooves and pig hooves and noses, and I just wasn't interested in putting that sort of thing in my body. I do try to live a more plant-based lifestyle. This is one of the few products that I allow to have animal in it, but I absolutely love it. I'm also really impressed with the company behind it. They're a values-driven company, and if you know from watching any of my shows, values matter to me. They've got a number of values. One, to be disruptive in the industry, and you know me, I like to be a little bit irreverent and go against the grain once in a while. I also really love that one of their values is humility and compassion, because those are huge and important to me. So if you're looking for a place to spend your money, and no, it's not an arm and a leg, no, it's not an MLM, this is affiliate marketing, which means if you did decide to purchase this product, yes, I would in fact get a small commission, which has nothing to do with your products or your purchase or the price point on the product, to be honest with you. It is simply 10 to 36% for me, depending on how many of this awesome product that I get a chance to move. Also, I'm paid daily, which I think is pretty amazing. So if you're somebody who's looking for some collagen and you just want to be our customer, I have got a $10 code. Drop a link or a comment below, or feel free to message me and I will share with you my link so that you can get $10 off of your first order. If you are somebody who's thinking, hey, I would like to get some product and also like to break into the affiliate game, that's a passion for me. I love teaching women and men, but mostly women, how to master the affiliate game. Once you learn how to do it with one company, you can do it with anything else. So I hope that you're enjoying the show, and without any further ado, back to the show.
I'm going to take a shot in the dark why people are shocked when they hear that you were assaulted. It's because you are a confident, outgoing person, and they don't assume that happens to people like you, and it fucking does. So like, this is again, right? We don't understand. We have this like cartoon social media view of a victim, and it's this weak, and it's not, it's the person that doesn't know what the rules of the situation are and doesn't have strong reinforceable boundaries that usually gets in the most amount of trouble. Doesn't matter if they're extroverted, introverted, ambiverted, male, female, non-binary. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is the predator who took the opportunity to take advantage of that person because they found whatever weakness they were looking for at that time in that person. And that's what I need to stress. At that time in that person. You're not that person anymore.
This might be one of my favoriteest episodes that I've done yet. No, I love it because I think it's empowering, and I know who my audience is, and I'm hoping that they can find the courage to share this with somebody who may not be talking about a story yet or still working through the process. Because you're right, people look at me and go, "You?" And I think, yeah, but I was 17 when it happened. I'm
Sure.
37 this year. It's
Yeah.
been 20 years of personal development and growth and forgiveness and rehashing that. But after it happened, there was 4 journals that I wrote about the experience, and then I burned them because that was my way of dealing with it, but the coping and everything else. And I think, yeah, we really can't, you know, put somebody into that spot or say that we know what they're going through, and unless we've, you know, actually talked to them and have an idea of what they're going through.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a misnomer too.
Well, this is why, like, so statistically in North America, 14 to 24 years old is where most of the bad stuff happens to you because you don't know, right? And
You
this
don't
is
know.
why education first is important to me, because like, luck to the power of social media, like my daughter is 12 and the stuff she shares is like powerful stuff from other people because we have this amazing tool where it's unfiltered, it's whatever. Especially, I think TikTok's filters are more open than a lot of other ones. So people are putting up their stories and sharing them, and they're getting this education that was frowned upon or shunned in educational establishments when I was coming up. Like, nobody talked about this.
Nobody talked about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it happened to you and nobody ever talked about it, you assume that you're the problem. Because if this was a real thing, then why isn't everybody talking about it? So obviously I must have fucked up. And it's just shame keeping everybody quiet. And it's a frustrating, toxic mud hole that I'm trying to jump out of. It starts when people are kids, like body autonomy with children. It starts right there, right? If your 3-year-old doesn't want to hug creepy Uncle Bill, then they don't have to hug creepy Uncle Bill. Because if you spend all your time telling your child, oh, just go ahead and hug. Oh, it's not that bad. They're family. Oh, that's what they're absorbing. And then when somebody they know gets creepy, they hear in their head, oh, just hug Uncle Bill. And then it goes south. So we need to show them, like, sorry, I'm on a rant right now, but this boys will be boys is such bullshit and used so wrong. And socializing young women to be complacent to being uncomfortable, this both has to fucking stop. Like, now.
I agree. I can't count the number of times I have been made uncomfortable. And, I've been watching, like I said, a lot of these, shows, right, while I'm editing and stuff like this, and looking at the old way that things, people got away with. And I think, I'm so glad that things are continuing to change. And I know for a lot of people, they are feeling attacked, right? A lot of men are feeling attacked right now. Our last edition of the Create the Ripple magazine was about issues that matter to men and mental well-being. And part of it was, I know that I tend to come from a more, feminist bend, or, I need some equality and I want to be able to speak my mind and feel safe about doing that without immediately being shamed for what happened to me because of what I was wearing. And I was like, I was 17 years old wearing a turtleneck. I was not asking for it, I promise you. And I think, how much of a shift that is. But you're right, this boys will be boys. And I try in all of my posts and stuff to say, hey, look, I am saying, guys, you got to do better. You have to do better. And I'm looking at my feminine camp and saying, ladies, we also need to do better. We need to be having conversations about boundaries. We need to be making it safe for other women to talk to us about what happened and not shaming them for who they were, or what they were doing, or any of those things. So it's definitely everybody just needs to stop blaming and start saying, hey, I'll do my part. And my part starts here, regardless of what that is.
I can't agree with you more. That's such a great point. And we all need to have this conversation to be able to have it openly in a safe spot. Like, safe spaces are meant to have hard discussions, in my opinion. They're not made to shelter you from hard discussions. So we create a safe space so we can have, this is a safe space. We're talking about awkward stuff, right? There's no anything happening. And I think that's super important, because the shame-based culture is the reason these people are allowed to get away with what they get away with, because they can use shame as a tool to shove down any kind of communication on the subject. And that's our shame, our ignoring the problem is allowing the problem to continue, because again, then you feel like that person, like, well, this isn't supposed to happen to me. I wasn't doing the thing. I wasn't wearing the short skirt. I wasn't intoxicated. Why is this happening? And then we start building on our own shame pile, right? And the boys will be boys thing, for reference, if you use boys will be boys to explain sexual misconduct, that's not what it was for. Boys will be boys is for like, hey, my younger son somehow got caught in a tree. You're like, yeah, boys will be boys, right? Oh, my son decided to snowboard down a grass hill. Yeah, boys will be boys. That's what boys will be boys are for. It's not for, oh, the swimming captain decided he could get sex from this person. If you haven't read Know My Name by Chanel Miller, I actually have it right here, weirdly. It's the lady that was assaulted by Brock, I can't really show it because of my background. Anyways, Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I highly recommend it.
There will be a link in the show notes for sure.
Okay, it's an uncomfortable read.
Okay.
It makes me angry every 3 pages. But this woman who was assaulted by Brock Turner, big swim star, it's where the guy was like, we don't want to wreck his future for 20 seconds of fun or whatever the quote was. This is her entire tale of what happened to her. She couldn't tell her parents, how she was worried, how she had all the evidence against this guy, and still the guy got 3 months, right? So it's a very powerful read. And if you, again, for the men out there, and I know you're trying to help, if you want a way to help, get a hold of me. I can try to give you something you can do. But if you don't think it's happening, it's because you're not looking into the stories of the people that were victimized. If you listen to the stories of the victims, no matter how uncomfortable it is, then you'll start to get an understanding of the problem that's being faced. I'm a 6'1", 250-pound man. I'm a big, I'm a big guy. So the things that I face aren't going to be the things that Candice faces, or my sister, or my daughter, or my fiance faces, right? That's all going to be different things. We need to understand that, because what we think problems are, like a guy took your parking spot, cut you off in traffic, let's get into a bar fight. Those aren't the problems that the women are facing in this situation, or even some other men, right? They're scared of getting bullied, harassed, sexually assaulted, all these things, right? This is a cross-gender problem. It happens lion's share to women, but it's happening all over the place.
And so all over. Yeah.
If you just look outside your lane for a couple of seconds, just hear these stories. Go on TikTok, find the hashtag, this is what I was wearing, and see how many young women were assaulted wearing like Disney princess costumes that were all up to the neck, and hoodies and jogging pants. It's just I don't know, it's a crazy dynamic.
It is. And I really liked the comment that you said, hey guys, it's you explaining away the guy that is just socially awkward. I'm like, yeah. Oh my gosh. Because I've said that, whether it's me going through my divorce right now and some of the challenges and the gaslighting that's happening there, or some of these other things, I'm like, if one of the guys in his corner who doesn't have the same challenge would say, yo, dude, come on, right? That would have changed the game.
Yep.
For me. Just totally changed the game. Or when I was 17, right? When I knew that he had gone back and told his buddies what he'd done. I'm like, what if some guy said, dude, on a line? But that didn't happen, right? It was more slap on the back and good for you. And that just makes me go, that's part of the problem.
This I can speak of firsthand, because I've definitely explained away when I was younger behaviors of my friends that I would not condone now, right? And that's the education part on this. So again, if you haven't done this yet, this is your time to maybe look. My tip for socially awkward seems to be the moniker that people use as deflection for inappropriate behavior. Here is the true socially awkward person. Socially awkward people know they're socially awkward. They've been told they're socially awkward, and they try not to be socially awkward as hard as they can. Yes. So they'll ask for consent more than almost anybody if they're truly socially awkward. They might be like, hey, I said this thing. Is that too much? I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll stop.
Oh, they're cute.
Pardon? Yeah, exactly, right? People who say they're socially awkward have no filter, are using that as a reason to speak how they want to speak. If you have a relationship with somebody, and you ask them to change their behavior, and they apologize and don't change their behavior, that's a problem. That's not being socially awkward. That's not listening to your boundaries. But if you correct somebody and they adjust, or they start trying to adjust, that's what's allowed. And so we got to stop this. If you're a man, you're not allowed to say these things. Yet you are, but you got to explain why we're talking about these things, right? And this is the problem, is that when we're having these conversations, the good people are getting too scared to get in trouble that they don't want to have the conversation, and the bad people don't give a shit. So tip number one is socially awkward is only true if they're trying to change their behavior. Otherwise, you're just using it as a shield for predation. That's a very important tip.
Yes. And I love that we've taken the time to really go into words, because words matter to me. And I mean, right down to, you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Trust the Niggle. The niggle for me was that I knew I was uncomfortable and I was ignoring it. Right. And so if I look back on my life, these huge learning moments and growth moments for me when I was not trusting the niggle. I mean, and the niggle for me goes right back to a couple of weeks ago. We were buying a new car and the finance manager made some comment about his wife sounding like a whining 5-year-old. And I remember thinking, that's out of line.
Right.
I was so pissed. I'm like, A, it's rude to your wife, and B, it's rude to me. And I'm sitting right here.
Yeah.
And it was just this moment of like, that's a niggle. And so many of us don't find the courage to say, hey, offside,
Right.
like offside, that's it. And what was interesting is when I started talking about how I was feeling and the fact that I wanted to say offside, people said, well, is it really your space to say it? I'm like, if I don't, then who will? Like, this is part of the problem. Offside.
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
I agree. I had a very uncomfortable conversation on one of my birthdays. So I don't know, 38 or 39, doesn't matter. And I had some friends over and it was a mixed ethnic group of people. It wasn't just one group of people. And one of my friends started everybody got really drunk because it was a party. And then one of my friends decided to start, you know, throwing in some racial comments against my friends of a different ethnic background.
Sure.
And I had to pull him aside and it wrecked the whole party. It wrecked it. But guess what? It never happened again. Right? So yeah, I understand. It was my birthday. The day was supposed to be about me. And here I am telling my friend not to be racist to my other friends. My friends, the people that were the victims of this, they left because they didn't want to wreck my birthday.
Yeah.
And they thought that them being there was wrecking it when I already had kicked the other guy out of the party. So it ended the whole thing because I decided to say something, but I don't regret saying something because now my friends who were there were like, oh, Randy actually means what he says. And my friend who was being offside doesn't do that anymore. He got adjusted. He was like, and then it was a big apology. Oh, I didn't realize that was not okay. I thought I was asking questions. I'm like, well, you were told. And now he does not do that anymore. Because in some places, some of this stuff is just knee-jerk reaction, right? Yeah. It's just, this is what I've always done. I haven't really thought about this. I learned it when I was 6. I didn't reassess my information. So I'm just spewing it out. And that's why somebody has to call offside. So then they're like, really? Is it offside?
And the look on their face is like, what do you mean offside? I'm like, it's offside.
But people don't, and that's what I think, because people don't, once they know something, they don't reassess it very often. And offside challenges that, and it's going to be uncomfortable. It's like when I teach people about boundary setting. If you didn't set strong boundaries and you want to start setting strong boundaries, you're going to have a very uncomfortable couple of months because your parents and your friends are going to be like, oh, you don't mean that. Oh, this is new behavior. This is going to go away in a week. And then month 3, they're going to be like, oh, this is who you are now. But the problem with boundaries is people can create strong boundaries, but they're not able to reinforce those boundaries.
Yes.
So they'll say once, like, don't speak to me like that. But then after they're like, well, I already told them. I don't want to keep telling them. And then all that means is your boundary wasn't strong and reinforceable. So people will treat you back the way you originally did it. I have a client, her mother-in-law was a problem. She had 5 awkward months of conversation with her mother-in-law. But now everything's going smoothly. And so that's the thing, right? Like this is work, unfortunately. This isn't 3 quick tips every woman should know to keep herself safe. This is,
sorry, ladies.
These are the things that, like, you have to understand. Change is always uncomfortable. Growth is always uncomfortable. Stress equals progress. So you have to realize when we're doing these things, especially if you're trying to become somebody who sets stronger boundaries. Because as we said earlier, I don't know if I made it this clear, but statistically, people with stronger boundaries are less likely to experience violent crime. And that also includes children. So make sure your children have body autonomy, know what to say, because if I'm a predator looking for prey, I'm not talking to the kid who's talking to everybody because I'm going to get caught. I'm going to go for the kid who has no contact points, no association, stays really quiet, doesn't stand up for themselves. That's going to be the person I prey on because predators don't want to get hurt. They don't want to get caught, and they want to be able to do what they did again.
Mhm.
So I'm going to choose people that I believe are weak enough that won't stand up or tell on me. The
Mhm.
kid with strong boundaries, that's not the kid that's picked. The woman, the man, the human with strong boundaries, it's very hard to pick that person. We
Mhm.
have this thought process, you have to be big and strong and fit. You don't. You have to know who you are. You have to know what you stand for. You have to know what your lines in the sand are. Because if you don't know those things, it's very easy to manipulate you.
Mhm. Wow. This has been a really powerful conversation, Randy, and I'm really grateful we got to have it. I'm sure we're gonna have to have a regular segment like this because this is important stuff that we're
I would love
talking
that.
about. And so we're coming sort of to the end, and I like to just make sure that if my guest had something they wanted to add, wanted to share, wanted to leave my listeners with, they have an opportunity to do so. So I'd love to offer that to you right now.
Sure. I don't really have anything else I want to drop on you other than, right, your experience is your experience. Don't let people tell you how to feel. I guess if you want more information on this kind of stuff, we're pumping out a bunch of online courses, one being boundary setting. It seems to be it by accident became my most popular thing that I taught. I teach, like, we call a course called Realities of Violence. We do like a 6-week self-defense educational based course for people. But the biggest issue I'm seeing isn't kicking and punching and choking. It's setting strong, repeatable boundaries. And we have to make sure our boundaries are strong to keep out the bad, but also permeable enough to let in the good, right?
Yes.
So we can't just put up a wall and not let anybody in. We need to create strong, reinforceable boundaries that are healthy, that we can let people in and out. So do that, try that. Talk to me if you have any questions. You can find me at Randy King Live on everything. And I think that's it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Randy, I appreciated spending time with you and discussing this tough stuff with you. Definitely conversations that matter. So thank you for engaging with me today.
No problem.
And to my listeners, you know the drill. If you got value out of this, like, share, comment, subscribe. It is really what we as content creators love to hear and see, because it lets us know that we're doing good stuff. And so please do that. Of course, all of the links, books, for you to be able to connect with Randy will be in the show notes. They were likely flashing across the screen if you're watching on YouTube, and we're excited for what's to come. So with that, I will catch you all on the flip side.